Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. It's me, Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, as always. And I just want to start this podcast by saying, how good is bonsai? Seriously. With everything that's going on around the world, to have the consistency of bonsai in our life for all of us is really, truly something positive to look forward to every day. And I was thinking that I might write to Apple and say, listen, why don't you change your newsfeed to have a daily positive bonsai input? So instead of looking at, whatever negative crap's going on around the world, we can have, hey, a prunus popped its first flower this morning, or that maple that I've been worried about that I repotted, the leaves finally opened up and the buds came out. Something positive like that. I think that would be a much nicer way to start the day than scrolling through all that stuff that tends to drag all of us down. So let's get into it. This podcast is going to be interesting. It's based around my thoughts and learnings, I suppose, from what I've picked up or what I've gathered and made note of over the last nearly 2 months now with repotting a lot of my bonsai. So in Melbourne, Australia, Victoria, it's coming to the close of the repotting season. So for me, repotting is generally around the July to August period for the majority of my exotics. There are other repotting windows for other species, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the repotting that's been done on the things like, maples and deciduous and your conifers and pines and that sort of thing. So I just want to run through a few things and see if it rings any bells for any of you guys, and hopefully you find it interesting. So let's get into this, hey. Right, repotting. What did I learn? I had it reinforced to me many times that wearing good quality gloves that allow for flexibility of movement of fingers and some pretty serious goggles are invaluable. Every time, without fail, that I'd start without goggles, a bit of stone or something would flick up and hit me straight in the eye. I don't know how it happens because it didn't seem to go anywhere else, but it seemed to go straight in my eye. So it's really important to make sure you got the right gear for your protection. And on top of that, it's really important to make sure that you've got the right tools available when you're ready to go. So planning for repotting, I've said it before, but planning for repotting is really, really important. Not just knowing which trees you're going to be repotting, but making sure that you've got the necessary soil mix, the pot mesh, the wire for tie-ins, the pots that you want to use to transfer trees to or switch around, all that stuff. There's no point suddenly going, right, this weekend I'm going to repot my tree or trees or whatever it is, and then suddenly going, right, now I've got to go and get all the gear. It's stuff that you should have had months and months beforehand. So being prepared really does make a massive difference when it comes to the speed and efficiency in which you can repot. I don't like the stress that is associated with repotting because it shouldn't be. It should be just another task that we undertake with our bonsai, not something that you are panicking about or worried about, because learning the right technique for it makes a massive difference. But being prepared is invaluable. So one of the questions I posed to myself as I was working through trees, repotting one after the other, was, does repotting get easier or harder over time? Now, just hear me out. So I think in my mind, the physical process gets harder over time, but the decision-making process is harder initially. So let me just break that down for you. So when you've got a tree that you've acquired from nursery stock and it's in a grow tub or a plastic pot or whatever it is, and you've done work on it, you've decided, for whatever reason, now's the time it's going to go into a bonsai pot. When you take that tree out of the pot, it comes out quite easily because often nurseries put them in soil mix, which is is okay for growing nursery stock, but not really for refinement of high-end bonsai. So it's, quite a soft organic mix, and you'll find the roots in there are okay. There'll be, some issues and whatever else, but all in all, you can take it out of there and pretty much a lot of the soil starts to fall apart, and you can start working through it pretty easy because it's quite soft. And the first thing we do is we look at, obviously root mass reduction. So we've got to go from a larger grow pot or plastic container to something like a bonsai pot size, whether it's, a step towards a bonsai pot or whether it's into a bonsai pot itself. It's always that root reduction that has to be done, which is stressful. When you first start looking at those things, it is a stressful thing to consider that you're cutting off these roots off a viable tree, and it's daunting. So there's always a lot of fear and anticipation with that. There's also the major root removal. Often when they're in those tubs, a lot of the root work that needs to be corrected when it's in a bonsai pot doesn't happen. So they sort of slip pot from one pot to the next for their whole life, and then eventually someone comes along and says, "Yep, I'm going to make that into a bonsai," because before that it's really just a tree in a pot, and you need to make some adjustment to the tree to get it ready or put it into bonsai life. So root mass reduction, as I said, major root removal too, and also then sort of starting to think about angle the tree is going to be put on and all that sort of stuff. So those things are all thoughts where you're planning for the future, for some point down the track. So it's not physically hard work, it's mentally hard, and it's the sort of thing that that if you cut corners or if you are indecisive, that's the sort of thing that you're going to pay for somewhere down the track. That's where you won't see it now. You'll go, oh yeah, I've repotted. It's come down from a big pot. It's gone into a whatever pot, and I'm happy with that. But that big curling root that wraps around the trunk, or the big gnarly one that is growing halfway up the trunk that you've sort of buried the tree halfway in the pot, is still there. But it's sort of like, that's for later. For now, it's like, I'm going to focus on the foliage. I'm going to focus on ramification. I'm going to focus on making things look pretty and making it into a bonsai. That's all well and good. But the chance for correcting flaws or issues that you have when you repot only comes around every 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So delaying the inevitable is just going to make it harder for you later on. So if you think that, let's say work on the average, work on a 3-year cycle for repotting, and you've got an issue with a root that's wrapping around the trunk. Now, when you look at that 3 years down the track, you're not just dealing with the root that was wrapping around the trunk, you're dealing with a root that has got a lot thicker, that has maybe had the trunk swell as well and grow around that root. So therefore you've got some kind of scarring issue to deal with for that root that's wrapping around the trunk. And you've also got 3 years of development in the top part of the tree. So you've got this tree which is developed nicely, 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8. So suddenly the development of the tree has started to jump away, and you're looking at it going, it's really starting to take shape. The 5-year plan that you've had in the back of your mind, you're 3 years into it, so you're doing really, really well, really pleased with it. Pull it out of the pot, start to repot and go, oh yeah, that's right. That's that wrapping root that I didn't do anything about 3 years ago. And now instead of being an issue, it's now a major issue, because you've not only got this scarring, you've not only got this thick root, but you've also got a massive amount of fine feeder roots that are connected to that wrapping root that need to be removed from the tree. And you just cannot leave it. So sooner or later, you have to tackle that problem. One way or another, you're going to have to tackle the problem. And it's whether you do it at the start before you get into the development phase, or you do it a lot further down the track. And I don't mean to make this sound heartless or brutal or anything like that, but 3 years ago, your investment, like I'm talking not monetary, but I'm talking emotional investment into this tree that's becoming a beautiful bonsai, it wasn't anywhere near what it is 3 years later. Watering a tree on average once, twice a day for 3 years, feeding the tree during the growing seasons, spraying it for pests and disease, making sure that it gets fed when it needs to be fed, making sure it gets sunlight, making sure it gets air movement, making sure it's wired, it's unwired, it's rewired, it's unwired, all that sort of stuff for 3 years. You've got a strong emotional commitment to that tree, to that bonsai, that now suddenly has to take a step backwards somewhere around the way. And that pressure, that stress that you felt 3 years ago, I'm telling you now, it's about 1,000 times more than what it was back then. So I just think that delaying the inevitable is going to creep up and bite you on the bum, and you're gonna pay the price for it. So that's one of the things that I learnt. Now, flip the coin. There's also decisions which need to be delayed. So, I'm not trying to contrast exactly or contradict exactly what I just said, but you need to also consider that the most important thing with your bonsai is the health of the tree. I say that every time. I thoroughly believe that if you want a beautiful bonsai, you get a healthy bonsai, and sooner or later it will become beautiful following the correct procedures. But you can't have a tree which is unhealthy that is beautiful. It's just not going to last the test of time. So you need to, when you're repotting, plan things out, and it may mean that you need to delay certain developmental tasks for that tree until the root structure, therefore the health of the tree, is strong enough in a position to be taken to that next step. So I know for myself, when I have taken, there's a pine tree that one of my black pines that I'm thinking of in particular. When I first got that, acquired it as nursery stock, and I bought it because it had a nice bark, had nice characteristics, next to no branching on it, next to no ramification. I knew the root ball was an absolute disaster, but it was worth a long-term commitment because I could see something potentially in the tree. So I took it, repotted it, took it out of the pot, and it had exactly what I thought, very, very poor roots. It was in very poor soil mix, had next to no work done. It's one of those trees that you see that really should be in the bargain basement sale section of a bonsai nursery. Anyway, so I took it, I repotted it, and I put a note on it with a tag saying, very poor roots, do not touch. And when it came time for decandling that tree in the summer, I was decandling all my pines, and you start getting into, when you're working with a lot of trees, you start getting into auto mode, which is why I put these notes on the tree. So I got to it, had a look at it. I hadn't even thought about it, I hadn't remembered that it had poor roots in this thing, but I looked at it and thought, yeah, it's shot off, it's starting to grow, it's doing okay, it's being fed, bang, I'm going to put this on the bench and I'm going to start decandling. So I was in the workshop, sit down. By chance, I just looked down at the tag that I'd put in there with the repotting date, and I saw my note saying, very poor roots, do not touch. And I went, right, that's this one. And then suddenly all those memories came back to me saying, there's next to no roots on this thing. So if I decandle it, I'm going to run the risk of this tree dying, or taking another massive step backwards. So, allowing foliage mass to grow will equate in root mass growing as well in the right conditions. So, what happens above happens below. So I looked at this tree and I went, I'm going to sacrifice a year's development of this tree to make sure that I can get the strength of the tree exactly where I want it to be. So let it grow out, got a bit long, got a bit shaggy, but looking at the buds that had started to extend, I could really see when I sat back and looked at that tree from a strength perspective, there were certain areas on the tree that were really strong, obviously the apex, and there were certain areas that were really weak. And it was then that I went, well, this thing's still trying to find its feet, and I just need to be really careful with it. So I put it back out, dosed it up with some more fertilizer, didn't decandle it, and left it aside. Gets to autumn, winter, that's when you start thinking about styling and wiring and pruning and branch selection, all that sort of stuff. So with this tree, I looked at it, looked at the note, did the same thing. No, sorry, you're just going to be left alone. I need root mass, I need strength on this tree. The development can come later on. I can wait a whole year in the life of this tree to make it magnificent for the next 250 years. So I'm not fussed by missing out on wiring a tree or having a tree on my bench that looked a bit shaggy or looked a bit dishevelled. So left it, fed it. Gets to the next year, go through. Obviously, it wasn't repotted because I only repot my trees every 2 or 3 years. Next year came around when it got to decandling time. Looked at the note, and went, "Yep, you're strong enough now." So then it starts falling into line with the development of the tree. So, and now I look at that tree and it's lovely. It was used on a demonstration with a local bonsai club. The bark on the thing's great. The ramifications really developing. It got wide too the following year. Everything took place. So by not pushing that tree too hard and by making sure that I focused on the roots of the tree, allowed me to get to the point where I know I could develop it and take it to the next level. So that was something really, really important to learn when you're coming from these nursery stock pots to your bonsai conditions. When you put a tree into a bonsai mix, and it's a controversial subject, but when you put into a bonsai mix, and we'll just call a bonsai mix a more open, more free-flowing, less organic type mix, pumice based. Let's just stick with that for now because that's easy. So a pumice or scoria based component to the mix, then you'll find with the right conditions and right feeding regime, right watering, everything lining up, the stars are lining for how you look after that bonsai. The root mass becomes rock solid with fine feeder roots. So when you're considering the root work, I'm talking about the physical root work of a tree which has come from a black pot, it's quite easy. Decision making different, but the physical work is quite easy. So what I learned this year, well, I've known it before, but what I started thinking about for the podcast was having trees that have been, in a bonsai mix, and my bonsai mix, I make no secret about it. It's 1/3 pumice, scoria, and pine nuggets. So I use that for all of my trees in my yard. It seems to work really well for me and my conditions and my environment, my regimes, and blah blah blah. So there's the disclaimer. But I find that I develop a really solid mass of roots. So if you look at my YouTube channel, you see the process for repotting that I've put up lately. But the process is the root sickle around the edge to break the bond between the roots and the pot, get the tree out of the pot and work on the pot, then come back to the tree, start working the roots. And I can tell you, I've never been so exhausted in my arms and my shoulders from using the root rake, trying to break apart those roots in repotting than what I have this year. I feel like it's just everything's come to a crescendo where my trees just seem to be at such a nice condition now, and there's so many fine feeder roots that I'm dealing with this solid brick. So imagine trying to take a house brick with a little metal rake and trying to break that house brick apart with that root rake, and it's exhausting. It's really hard. So, we want fine feeder roots. We want the tree to be healthy and really to focus in on that, hone in on that transpiration process through the fine feeder roots for the tree to build its strength, to make sure our fertilising is as optimal as possible, to make sure that, when we've got those stinking hot days in summer, that we water the tree and the tree can actually do something with it through its roots, rather than, watering a tree with really poor roots and it can't do anything with it, and we wonder why leaves get burnt on trees. But trying to deal with it at the repotting stage after a 3, 4, 5 year period, depending on the cycle for the tree, it's hard, it's exhausting, and you need to make sure that you've got time up your sleeve to do that sort of work, because it can certainly grind down on you, where you sometimes maybe look at the trees and go, yeah, I might just do that one tomorrow. It's a big tree, it's going to take a long time, and that's fine, but it's really important to make sure that you still do it. But if you cut corners at repotting time with your trees, then you're going to pay for it. If you don't remove enough roots, if you don't free the root ball up if it stays as a solid block and that water's going to wash over the edge of the root ball and get to just the outside edge. So let's say in a pot, right, you remove 25% of the root ball off each of the sides and underneath, right? If you don't free up the root ball that's left, the remaining section of the root ball that you've got, and it becomes a solid block, right? Then when you put it back in the pot, you put your new mix in, you put the tree in, secure the tree in the pot, add the new mix around the tree. All looks good so far. So from an external point of view, you're going to look at it. The tree's going to grow new roots, no problem at all. Foliage is going to come out. It's going to look great. You're going to pat yourself on the back saying, yep, well done. You've repotted that tree. It's doing really well. Great stuff. Jump forward a couple of months, get to the warmer months of the year, and you're trying to water the tree. So you're watering an umbrella, effectively. So where the nabari is, the base of the tree, where the tree goes into the soil surface, water's going to hit that section, run off that section, get to the new potting mix that you've put around the outside, so the 25%. It's going to run down there. It's going to become nice and moist in those areas. And the feeder roots that have extended out to that part of the pot will get water. So they'll be okay. They'll continue growing. But the inner root core of that tree, which is the remaining 75% of functioning roots in that tree, runs a real risk of dying. And also the section below that root ball, below the umbrella in the new section of the pot, runs a risk of dying too, because the water can't get through that area of the root ball when you're watering the tree. So that shortcut is really common. It seems to be that when people are pressed for time or maybe don't want to do the physical work, the hard work that they need to do with repotting a more advanced tree, that's when you'll pay the price for those sort of things. Like I said, switching back to the nursery stock, you can take one of those trees out of a pot, knock the dirt off, and be ready to go in a couple of minutes. And then you're making decisions, which can take longer, but really it's not a lot of time transitioning that tree and getting rid of the soil root mass that you need to transition it to a bonsai pot. Flip it to one of these bigger trees, and you can be looking at, depending on the size, of course, but you can be looking at an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hour solid block of work on that tree. So, sometimes being pressed for time is not the best time to do any bonsai work. And I've said that before too. When you're working on your trees, you don't want to sit down with a stopwatch and go, I've got 15 minutes. I'm going to prune the foliage on this tree. Bang, go. Right, I'm out. I'm off to do something else. Because you'll compromise, you'll cut corners, you'll make the wrong decisions, or even worse, you won't make the decisions at all. You won't do the work that should be done. Same with this solid mass of roots. It is bloody hard work. And you've got to have the right tools for it. I found myself going through transitioning from single prong root hooks to large triple root hooks to smaller root rakes with 3 prongs, then transitioning down to chopsticks, and doing that work now means that I've got a good solid 3 years of really strong, healthy growth for that tree through its root mass being able to grow and through the tree being able to get water to flow through its system, which means my feeding, all the stuff I rattle on about all the time. All that stuff can happen because I've invested an hour and a half, 2 hours on the tree. When you look at the overall time, that it's going to have to wait to get repotted again, that's nothing. And some of the smaller trees, some of my smaller pines are on a 4-year cycle with repotting, which I hear people gasping in the background, and how can that be? In the right conditions, that's definitely the case. And if you've looked at my Instagram or Facebook, you'll see the trees aren't suffering as a result, because I'm giving the trees exactly what they need when they need it in the perfect conditions that they need to thrive. So when I looked at repotting those, you're looking at a tree that's in a pot that's, say, 15 centimetres wide, a little rectangle pot. You'd think that'd be a quick in and out, 10 minutes, I'm done, I can smash through 100 of these in a day. No, that's not the mindset that I use or I have when I'm going into repotting that tree. I look at it the same way as I look at a tree that's got an 80 centimetre wide pot. I'm going to do the best I possibly can to make sure that this root ball doesn't need to be touched for the next 3, 4, 5 years, because I'm going to do everything to the best of my ability to make sure that it's perfect. So, I don't get into a conveyor belt type scenario when I'm repotting my trees. I don't have them all lined up one after the other with a stopwatch going, where it's not like shearing sheep, where you work to how many sheep you can get through in an hour. I saw that in a documentary a couple of months ago, which was really interesting. But with repotting, I don't look at it. I look at my measure of success being that tree is not going to be touched or need to be repotted until 3 or 4 years, because I do the right work on it now. That one before I was talking about with the solid root mass with the umbrella type watering model, that needs to get repotted every 2 years. And really, you're only going to have viable roots in that 25% section of the pot, which, it sounds great, but I always measure success with bonsai through summer, which for us, it's 45 degrees Celsius on the hottest days for like a week-long period, and we get very strong northerly winds, and everything dries out and gets crispy really, really fast, really, really quickly. So making sure that I've got the correct base for that tree, the correct foundation, the correct root mass, the correct pot scenario, means that when it gets that week, that 45 degree temperature, I still have to be bloody vigilant. I still have to be really mindful of watering and positioning and protection and all that sort of stuff. But I know that I can do it resting a little bit easier, saying that I know the tree has the foundation to be able to manage how it looks after itself, how it transpires, how it gets water through its system, because I've done the hard yards when I've done the repotting. So another thing that I've learned with repotting too was just to remember why you're repotting. Now, you're repotting, obviously, transpiration, freeing up a root mass to provide soil air and an environment where strong, fine feeder roots can grow and can develop. But you're also considering other things too, which need to be done before you take the tree out of the pot. Things like change of angle of the tree. Will the tree look better when it's on a different angle? And I was talking with a fellow last night on a Zoom session about it, and one of the things I really don't like about bonsai, or one thing I try and change, not that I don't like, that's the wrong word, but one thing I try and change when I'm considering repotting is straight lines, vertical or horizontal. And often you find that really slight, subtle change in angle on the tree changes the whole perspective of that tree and how you look at it. So if the base of the tree is dead vertical, then maybe a slight tilt to the left of a few degrees can make a massive difference. You need to check, obviously, that's not going to make something else become vertical and horizontal further up the tree, but spending a couple of minutes before you take the tree out of the pot, before you make the decision to repot, can make a massive difference, because it changes your process of repotting as well. The angle change is really important to consider in how you do it. And there's on my YouTube channel, if you just look for Bonsai Matsu, you see there's one I did, I think last year in 2020, for the changing of angle of a Scots pine, and it goes through the process of how you work the root ball differently to one that you're just transitioning to a straight, root mass reduction type scenario. So that's part of the reason why you're repotting. But you need to know that stuff and be on top of it before you take the tree out of the pot.
spend my youth dropping coins in a wishing well.
Now, this next one is something which applies to all of us, me included, because I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I've got an actual a case. So, for someone who's done bonsai all their adult life, you know, I'm getting close to the 50 stage now, and you know, so for the last 30 plus years, I've been involved in bonsai, and I still find that I'm learning as I go, which is why I think I love bonsai as well, because there's always something, and there's always something to be to get cross at yourself for. So what this one applies to is the don't leave for tomorrow what you should do now. I was actually thinking about making that the title of this podcast, because I have a little book that I write notes down in for the podcast to keep it fresh and keep it interesting, and this one, if you could see my book, it's highlighted, it's scribbled on, it's massive, because it's still a viable lesson that applies to everything that we do with bonsai. You know, don't leave for tomorrow what you should do today. And I'll give you the disclaimer. Strength is really important. So holding off something for another reason is perfectly fine. You know, removing 95% of the roots on a mature bonsai because it's a crossing root. I don't recommend doing that until you've got the rest of the root mass at a position where you can do that safely. So that's the disclaimer. But anyway, so I've got this big turkey oak, which you may have seen on Instagram. And it had been, I think it's in the third or fourth year cycle for repotting. And it had grown well. It looked okay. There was, the foliage mass is nice. The ramification probably isn't exactly where I'd like it to be. There's no structural flaws with the thing. It's still in development, of course. It's got beautiful bark. It's got beautiful trunk, and I'd fed it well. It'd been a beautiful position. So everything was looking good for this thing. So I took this monster out of its pot, and the pot's got to be, I don't know, 80 centimetres wide, something like that. So it's a big one. It's a big tree. It's a big heavy tree. It really should be a 2 or 3 person lift, this thing. It's so big. And so I start scratching around, start working on the surface, you know, cleaning away all the moss, the weeds, all that sort of thing, and using the light rake to sort of bring things back a little bit, and start working and looking at it, and that's all looking good. It's nice surface, Nabari, everything's looking great. Start working around the periphery, around the edges of this thing, starting to drop the angle of the root ball down, and I suddenly, you know, start hitting some larger roots that had sort of been almost touching the edge of the pot, and you know, I can see where they'd been cut to fit into the pot in the first place. And so I went, that's right, that's this tree, that's this one that I looked at repotting from the perspective of let's get this into a slightly smaller pot, and let's make sure that this thing starts to take on the form of a nice bonsai. So anyway, that was okay. Still start working around the edges, flip it over, start working on the bottom, start reducing the root mass underneath, and as I start doing it, I start to reveal the problem. There's these big, thick roots, and when I say thick, I mean, you know, thicker than if you put your first and second finger together, they're about that thick, and they're running around the underneath side of this Nabari. So from the top, the Nabari looks really nice. From underneath, there's these thicker roots, and I can see where I've cut a few of them to sort of reduce them, but it was a job that I'd put on the I'll sort that out next time list. And I remember it. When I started working this tree, I remember exactly what I was thinking at that time, and all I thought was, you idiot. You know, all you've done is you've just delayed what could have been done 3 years ago, because for whatever reason 3 years ago, and I can't remember what the reason was, that this didn't happen to this tree. And has it set back the tree? Possibly not. Could it have got further? Well, I'll never know. It probably could have. It probably could have developed a lot nicer Nabari, because these thick roots have all developed nice fine feeder roots on the ends of them. But my overall root mass, if you work on a percentage of viable feeder roots in that root mass, looking at these thick roots and knowing that I'd have to remove them this time, then instead of being at 100% capacity, it's probably dropped back now to say 60%, because removing these thicker roots to correct the root structure for the tree meant that I've had to take off a significant amount of fine feeder roots that aren't going to be there for a little while with this tree. So upstairs, above the soil surface, all looks good. Below the soil surface, this thing's taken a bit of a hit. It's got to go backwards a little bit, which, as you know, means that my development of this tree now, I've put a note on it saying, don't touch it in spring. So when the spring growth gets here, it's going to be one of these ones that I'm going to have to let run, let the root mass start to sort itself out, and then consider what's going to happen with it again when I get to through summer and to next autumn, when it's the pruning time for it before it goes into dormancy again. So, I sort of got a bit cross at myself thinking, you've got this beautiful tree, this majestic tree. Yeah, a year and it's 6 months in its life cycle is nothing. Which is fine, but I've really held this tree back a little bit by not making the tougher decisions 3 years ago. And look, there may have been justifiable reasons why I didn't do it. There may have been not enough root mass to remove those thicker roots as well. Look, give myself the benefit of doubt, but looking back at it now, I know that it's really pertinent that don't leave for tomorrow what you should do today. And repotting is one of those things it's not one of the most, it is the most important thing that you're going to do with your bonsai. And not doing it right, maybe cutting corners on little things like the potting mix that you use, not little things, major things, like cutting corners on the potting mix, making, maybe not tying the tree in as neatly and strongly and efficiently as what you should do. They all come back to haunt you somewhere down the track. And using a single strand of 1.5 mil aluminium wire that's nowhere near strong enough to hold the tree now, just because you don't want to hurt the tree and whatever, you're gonna pay consequences for that for the next 2-3 years until that tree is actually repotted correctly somewhere down the track. So and the nabari on the tree is one of the most attractive parts of bonsai in my eyes. It's the first thing that you look for. When you're analysing a bonsai, you look at the base, you look at those surface roots. Now's your chance when you're repotting trees to make corrections, to prune away roots that are crossing, to make sure that you're getting a nice even root spread, to make sure that you take a nabari that you've done some work on before and make it even better, by shaving things underneath, making sure that those downward roots are removed, so we start encouraging the lateral root growth, which then encourages that surface spread, which encourages taper in the tree as well. All that stuff is really important, and the only chance you get to do it is when you're repotting. And repotting window, perfect timing for it is just prior to waking up from a dormancy period. So for me, just prior to the releasing of resources and strength of the tree coming out of the winter period for my exotics is ideal. And that's why in the last 2 months, over 150 trees have been repotted by me, and my hands can attest to it. They're, I'm exhausted. I'm tired by this time of this part of the year, but I'm also really strongly encouraged that I know that every year I knuckle down a little bit harder. I do things. I think about things slightly differently. I work root balls to take that next step, and I don't focus on the top of the tree at all when I'm working and repotting. All I'm thinking about is the root ball, and because I know that that's where this tree is going to be on a springboard. If I do this properly, this thing can take massive leaps forward and really progress at a rapid rate. And doing things like taking shortcuts, I know that it's going to be a tree that I'm going to look at somewhere down the track and go, I'm just not happy with it. It's just not getting where it should get. And it all comes down to me not doing the right thing by the tree. It's not the tree. The tree's just responding as it always is, with its basic driver to get sunlight. It's not focusing on anything else. But the environment that we have our trees in is really, the success or failure is dictated by its strength. Where's the strength come from? Strength comes from the roots. So making sure that you're doing things right, not cutting corners, and not leaving things for tomorrow is really going to be valuable to you, to somewhere in a really, really short term future. It doesn't take long to see the benefits of good repotting technique and practices. The other another lesson that I've learnt is good things take time. So not leaving things for tomorrow, definitely, but don't expect things to happen overnight. You need to have that plan in place. These long-term plans that we have for bonsai. You set a 3-5 year business plan in place in a business, and it sort of seems like it's never achievable because the dynamics change, and 3 years gets revised after 12 months, and it's an evolving mess. Whereas with bonsai, those 3 to 5 year plans are really important, and it's important that the chopping and changing of strategies and techniques and end goals, that sort of stuff, just shouldn't happen frequently. It should be deliberate. When you are changing the plan for a tree, do it with a long-term goal in mind. Don't do it just because you've got a whim and you've seen a photo on the internet and you think, yeah, hey, that tree could look like that now. Bang, you're cutting off branches and you're bending it into a pretzel and it's back on the bench, and then 6 months later, oh, that's not the shape I want it like this. And coming back to repotting, and it's repotting to someone not involved in bonsai seems like a pretty boring topic, but to me it's not. It's I hope you can hear it in my voice. It's really exciting. It's really really dorky, really nerdy, but it's so true that I know that when I work on the roots of the trees, that 5 year, 3 year plan all comes with my next repotting frequency for that tree, and I know that if I can do this work right now, if I can make sure that I've got this perfect, if I can blah, 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 all the stuff that I've been talking about, if I can get that correct, then I know that this tree in the top half, I don't have to worry about the bottom half anymore. All I have to do is focus on the top half, because I know I'm going to have this solid foundation on which all these other things are going to happen. And it's really exciting, like I look at some of my trees and stuff that I've grown in the ground that's, onto its second or third repot coming out of the ground now. When I look at the roots and I think back to when I first dug that tree out of the ground and it was back to a stump, there was, nothing there. And the strength of the tree made it grow these roots out into a grow box. That grow box was allowed to run for years. Develops its thick roots, they come out of there, you start chopping off the thick roots, it gets back to the fine roots, then the fine roots do another couple of years, and then it's into a bonsai pot, then the bonsai pot starts to grow, and now I'm looking at it after having been in the bonsai pot for a period of time. I take it out and all I see is this massive fine feeder roots, and it's like, like the branches have started to develop. I've still got sacrifice branches to thicken, but I know that the next 5 years with this tree is now achievable because I've got this root mass, which is exactly where I want to be to achieve my goals. And it's so important, and it's so vital that the importance just can't be underestimated. And you don't hear about a lot of this stuff. You don't see a lot of this stuff. When you look at online demos, or you look at any videos and stuff like that, because repotting is on the boring side, you don't often see dirt getting flicked around. What you will see is trees having raffia applied. You'll see them getting bent within an inch of their lives, and then somewhere down the track, hopefully you see them again if they survive the process, and you get to see where they're at. But to be able to do all that sort of stuff, it comes from what's happening below the soil surface. If you can get that part of the tree right, if you can get that strength factor for the tree right, then you've got the possibility and the options to do all those other things with your tree. If you don't, then, yeah, sure, the technique, the physical process is exactly the same. The outcome, though, is very different, and often it's, you know, as I say, it's into the green recycle bin or into the backyard fire. That's basically where these things end up. So, yeah, I've got to calm down a little bit now, I suppose. But repotting, you know, having just finished the repotting season, the major repotting season for me anyway, its importance just can't be undervalued. So with all that talk about repotting and strength and preparation and planning and all that sort of stuff, I wanted to look at wrapping up this podcast with a slightly different angle on another topic. So with the change of seasons, you know, obviously here in Melbourne we get 4 seasons, 4 very clear, distinct seasons, and it seems to be every year that every season change brings with it a burst of wind. And I know that's pretty common around the place as well, and really strong winds. You know, I don't think they're getting any stronger than what they were. I seem to remember them as kids, but they seem to be pretty persistent when they come around. And I tie the trees down, and I've talked about in previous podcasts about stuff getting blown over and whatever else, but I wanted to talk about the Forced Redesign. Now, this is a redesign on a tree on a bonsai that you haven't planned for and you didn't predict and you quite frankly don't want to make. But for whatever reason, hence the talk about the wind and the change of seasons and that sort of thing, these forced redesigns become essential because you've got a tree which has been damaged or something's happened to it. You know, whether a dog's chewed on a branch, ripped it out of its pot, where it's a branch has fallen on it from a larger tree above it, it's blown over, or possums have run along a bench, whatever it is. It's what I classify as a forced redesign. And, you know, if you loved the previous styling that you had, that's cool, but you've got to get your mind around, and this is the part I wanted to really talk about, is not the physical process of the redesign, but it's more your mental approach to that tree. I know from my point of view, I go through this period of being really annoyed, really upset, really disappointed because I suddenly feel that something I've worked on and put a lot of love and effort into is no longer there. But it's still there. That, you know, what I loved about that tree is still there, even if it's missing a branch or an apex or whatever it is. What you have to do is you have to then go back to the drawing board in your mind and you have to come up with a new plan. So effectively, you know, I talked about 5-year plans on your trees, or plans for your trees. What you need to do is effectively lock that previous plan away and start a new one. That's the only way you're going to get through a forced redesign with your trees. Not thinking about or talking about or saying, oh, you know, this tree, and looking back at photos and I remember when this was here, and, you know, getting your nearest and dearest to look at it and go, I remember when that tree looked like this and it doesn't look anything like it now. You can't do anything about it. That's why it's called a forced redesign. You literally can do nothing about it. You can't stick that branch back on. You can't take it back to where it was. If it's a expensive pot that's broken, you can't put it back together. You just need to move forward. There always has to be this forward progression with that tree, because I'm telling you now, what's going to happen is you'll look at that tree differently and you'll start treating it differently, and then that tree will start to act differently because it won't be fed as well as it should have. It maybe doesn't take a nice spot where it gets lots of sunshine on the bench anymore. It doesn't maybe get as much water as what it did because you're not out there twice a day out there smiling with your cup of coffee in the morning, putting a smile on your dial, looking at the thing. So I think, I know that you need to change your attitude and your approach with that tree almost immediately, and you need to develop a new plan for it and say, okay, so going forward, this tree is going to be like this, because what you need to find in it is the characteristics that you love. The nabari, or the bark on the tree, or the first branch, or the leaf, or the autumn colour that it gets, or the flowers that come in spring. Those sort of things. That's what you should focus on. Not what you've lost, but what you've got. It's not the glass half empty bit that we want to be on. This is the glass half full. And I'll go back to where I started the podcast. Positive news day for bonsai. It shouldn't be negative news day where, hey, the tree fell off the bench and I smashed the apex and I hate it. It should be, hey, love this tree. Every time spring comes around, I get these magnificent little pink flowers on it, and I just love it. It makes me smile for those 2 or 3 weeks every single year. And I've got the opportunity now to make it a different bonsai, or make the hard decisions that you couldn't make before because you were held back because of whatever reason, that's no longer there. So Forced Redesign, I know they're hard. I know they bring a lot of heartache, but being a half glass full type of guy, I think that you really need to focus on where you can take this tree to the next point, and have it with vengeance isn't the right word, but satisfaction, where you can look on this tree in 5 years' time and go, you know what, you're better now than where you were 5 years ago. And 5 years in bonsai is nothing. 5 years is a blink of an eye. It's 5 repotting seasons. So this tree may be repotted 2 or 3 times in that period for you. That's it. So when you look at it like that, bonsai time zips past really fast. So focus on the positives, but come up with a really, really important plan to how to take that tree. But most importantly, change your mental approach to that tree. Don't look at it with disgust. Look at it with hope and something positive for the future. Righto, well that brings us to the end of another podcast. Hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. Sorry it's been so long in between podcasts, but as always, bonsai life is busy life. Things always come around. These little living sculptures that we work on demand time and effort, and I love it. I hope you guys, and I know you do too, from the feedback that I get from all around the world. It's really nice. It's really encouraging, and I'm glad to hear so many positive things about the podcast, because I certainly enjoy making them, and I'm really, really happy that they inspire people and they push people and you get something out of it. It's an interesting time we've got around the world now, and bonsai is one of those beautiful things that certainly all around the world can unite us and keep us focused on the really positives, the things to look forward to are brilliant in bonsai, and they just keep getting better and better. And I get messages all the time, one day hopefully I'll have beautiful trees like yours, and I guarantee you will. It's the vision for how a tree is going to look is personal. That's entirely up to you. But I say it all the time that we're constrained by basic horticultural principles which apply worldwide, and to get the most out of your tree means having a really strong, healthy tree. And the health of the tree comes from its roots. The strength comes from its roots. So making sure that you're focusing on that at this time of year with repotting is really, really important. It seems maybe irrelevant because it's you're not chopping branches, you're not styling, you're not wiring, but it's not. That stuff happens down the track. And if you want beautiful trees, then focus on the roots of the tree in one way or another throughout the whole year. Not just repotting wise, but when you're feeding, when you're watering, all that stuff. It's really, really important and valuable. So the other thing that I want to finish with is to say you've got a plan for the future. It's super important. Plans, strategies, all that sort of stuff. But focus on the here and now. Don't skip over what you've got to do right now to achieve your objectives with the tree. Do what needs to be done now with your bonsai. Most importantly, really enjoy them at the stage they're at right now, because they're never going to be there again. for whatever reason, they're going to advance. They're going to change. They're going to evolve. They're going to be different. So what you're looking at on your benches right now, whenever you're listening to this, whether it's in 2021 or it's somewhere in the future, the bonsai that you've got in front of you will never look the same again, even tomorrow. They are changing, they're growing, they're evolving. That's the beautiful part about them. So make sure that you soak up every little ounce of enjoyment that you get from them, and continue with the plan. Stay true to the plan. Let the plan see out fruition. If you're focusing on 5 years, but you're chopping and changing every 2 months, then you're never going to get there, and it's going to come at the expense of the tree. So stay true to the plan, see it out, and enjoy every second of it. So thanks for sticking around. Thanks for coming back. Like I said, the YouTube channel is growing massively at the moment, which is great. There's a lot more content planned for it. So jump on, subscribe so you can start with that. Stick around for the podcast. I love this format. I love this medium. I love being able to be an earworm for you guys with whatever it is that you're doing. And please stay in touch as always. I love it. It's really, really great. Kind words are awesome, but wherever I can help, I'm more than happy to as well. So through the socials, Instagram, Facebook, through email, scott@bonsaimatsu.com, through the website bonsaimatsu.com. Please stay in touch and let me know how I can offer any words of wisdom or encouragement or guidance along the way. And as always, make sure you're loving your bonsai, stay up to date with them, and make sure that you enjoy every single second. So until next time, happy bonsai.